This is a great exercise here, and we are all converted. I can sit down and go home now, isn't it? You all know what I'm going to talk about. But I'm hoping that our ancestors have come and that they have brought a few guests with them. So even if we can't see anything. So I'm going to talk as if there are thousands of people and they haven't heard the principle. So if I get a bit animated, please forgive me, because I get excited and passionate when I talk about... Oh, wait a minute, is this mine or Bernard? Oh,
have you taken mine out, Ron?
I think so, but
My next slide is also principle of creation.
Okay,
so,
that's Bernard.
This is mine.
Oh, is it?
Isn't it? This is mine. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the principles of creation. This is obviously a follow-on from the introduction, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the nature of God and creation, giving and receiving, purpose of creation, anyway, the things that we are familiar with when we study the principle. I think because we are just us today, I may allow myself, if it happens, to kind of get into some part more than I should perhaps. It depends how the Spirit leads me, we'll just see how it goes anyway. But for now, let's just move on. Okay, you all have computers, and Bernard mentioned earlier the story about the doctor, which you know about. If you're sick, you go to the doctor. But, I just put a little bit of a modern twist on it. Because we all have computers, or we use computers, and sometimes they do not work. Sometimes you feel like getting a hammer to it, smashing it, or throwing it out of the window. And if you're like my wife, you just don't bother at all. You leave them alone. She doesn't even know how to switch on the computer at home, which is fine. But anyway, the thing is, sometimes things don't work. Now, we can talk about computers, we can talk about our health, we can talk about anything. If I think about this building here, something goes wrong. The electrics are not working. Earlier on we didn't have the lights on, and we had to go to Ed, because Ed somehow knows how it all works. He built it. I mean, maybe others were involved in building it, but somebody has to have an idea how it all works. So in this case, where a person is struggling with their computer, or we're struggling to fix the lights, you have to go to the person who knows how it works. The person who built something, the person who has taken it apart again and again, so they know exactly if something goes wrong, this is what I need to look at and fix it. And when it's fixed, we're all happy. When the lights came on earlier on, I thought, oh wow, great, now I can switch things on and they work. That's how it is, isn't it? In our daily lives, you drive cars. Does your car ever break down?
Yeah.
Well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And when it breaks down, it usually breaks down when you're at the traffic lights on a roundabout, or where there's a lot of traffic, the last place you want it to break down. And you have to call somebody else. Unless it's something you're familiar with and you know what to do, you have to call somebody to come and fix it. All right, this is all straightforward. We know this, and we're happy when things work again. But honestly speaking, when we look at our world today, it isn't quite as simple as that. We have an incredible understanding that came to us from true parents. But even with what we know, it's still a battle. How do we fix all of this? The pollution. You can't deal with everything. Kumiko now is taking care of things here, so you take care of an area that you're familiar with. But we can't get you to come to Cardiff and sort out the problems in Cardiff, or the problems in Swindon town. You try whatever you want to do, but you have to deal with an area that you can deal with. So if you want something to be nice, keep it nice, clean, whatever, you do your bit where you can. But it doesn't stop us thinking collectively, how can we solve these problems, But from the point of view of the world, our politicians, for all the good they may be doing, and I say may be doing because it's often questionable, the fact is they're working hard, but they do not have a solution to these problems. They deal with things like economics, or they'll tinker around the edges of something, and sometimes you scratch your head and think, my goodness, how on earth, pollution, isn't it simple? They have this COP1, COP2, COP26, COP27, where all these global leaders talk about solving the problems, and yet they go away with all these great plans, and they put them in the drawer, and then they come back next year and then talk about the next lot of plans, but they haven't dealt with the ones from last year. And so it goes on and on and on. And we get angry and we get frustrated because we think, these people are paid lots of money to do the jobs that we want them to do, but they don't do it. And we feel powerless. And so we vote somebody else in. I mean, in Africa, this is an issue. You get leaders who are often corrupt. And then the new leader comes up and says, I'm going to change things. So they all get rid of that one. The new leader comes in, and within 5 minutes he's as bad or worse than the one who was there before. And the people suffer, they continue suffering. So we continue suffering in a world with pollution, with global warming. You want to go on holiday in the south of Europe, and you're on fire. People are being moved out of their hotels because of all the things. And then there's problems, the poor creation suffers. It's reminiscent of the Bible, isn't it? The creation groans in travail, waiting for the coming of the sons of God. The creation waits because it has no master, no leader to take care of things so that the creation can live in peace. It suffers too. And then when suffering gets to a point where it boils over, resentment emerges, you get riots, or you get strikes. You get all sorts of unrest in society because things are not working. And then in the extreme, you get somebody who becomes a leader, misuses his power, and creates things to destroy others, invades another country. The war going on in Ukraine, other wars around the world, the conflicts, and so on and so on and so on. Because somebody, somewhere, wants the power to control. Well, we all want to be in control of something, even if it's just ourselves. But there is a right and a wrong way. And what we are seeing in the world today is that the power is being misused. It's not working. And nobody has an answer. Well, I say nobody has an answer. What I'm saying is that people are looking in the wrong directions, trying to fix things by tinkering around the edges. But we need to figure out, well, if we want to fix the world, what should it be like in the first place? And that's where we start looking at the ideal. We have to go back to the idea of God. Now, when we start talking about God, a lot of people say, I don't believe in God. But then St. Paul in the Bible makes it very clear. Since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen and understood from what has been made. So they have no excuse. We have no excuse for not knowing God, not believing in God, even if we don't understand. Somehow he's saying we have no excuse. Well, if we have no excuse and it's so simple, why is it nobody or so many people struggle to believe in God? St. Paul had a particular relationship with God, I'm sure. He could have an experience with Jesus that many people would die for. So perhaps he had something that enabled him to understand, but the average person doesn't have that. So it's not so easy just to believe without some understanding. So then, thinking about what St. Paul said, at least we can start to analyze this. And we are fortunate because even we were in ignorance. We knew nothing until we met true parents. And then we discovered there is somebody, a great man who has this relationship with God, who was able to explain things in a way which made sense to us. So we learned that everything can be seen in the creation. What we need to see next, though, is how to look at it. And this is what Father has taught us, isn't it? To look at nature is to see how it all fits together and comes together. But again, there are complications because we need some ways of looking at it. So let's consider this for a moment. God is invisible. We can't see God. So we know that in the same way that there are many people who've lived and died in the past. Bernard mentioned some people, musicians, the 27 Club. These are great musicians. They're gone. They're dead. But we can listen to their music and we can think, wow, that's really dynamic music. That's a powerful person there. Great inspirational characters. So in the same way then, we listen to their music, we find out something about them. But thinking of the past, you study the lives of people like Shakespeare or the great poets or artists that have lived and died. We study their works. And through studying what they've done, we start to understand something of their character. And in this way we can learn about these people who are no longer physically with us. Well, these people are invisible to us, but they're visible to us through what they've done. In the same way, if we think about God who is invisible to us, we can think about the nature and character of God through what God has created. And that's what we're going to look at next. In many faiths there is this symbol, certainly I think in Buddhism, where they have this yang-yin symbol. And the yang-yin symbol simply tells us there are two opposites which come together harmoniously. So it's a great symbol because it tells us from the principle point of view that everything exists in this dual characteristics of positive, negative, man, woman, male, female, stamen, pistil, positive, negative, and so on and so on. But the incredible thing is, all of these things exist harmoniously, having give and take through which energy multiplies, and something is created. So the smallest particles were created from the same principle of give and take between the particles, electrons, protons, and then they form molecules and atoms and cells, and they become something according to an original design. Now, if you're an artist yourself, if you like to paint or if you like to build something, maybe Ed, when he's building this or building the toilets, has a design in mind. And he builds according to that design. And then when it's finished, everybody can come along and say, wow, that's really great. And Ed is happy because it conforms to a design that he had. I'm assuming that's how it works. In the same way then, when you think about all the things of creation, they didn't just appear by themselves. They are the effect of some cause. And the cause has a design in mind, beginning then from small particles and building up. Flower becomes a flower because the original design is for a flower to appear at the end of a process. Or if it's not a plant, it's an animal. And finally, of course, there are human beings. We all exist because of some original design. And it's all incredible because it exists in a harmonious, positive, negative. Opposites that attract and develop. Now, I learned in science in school that like signs repel. And it's unlike signs that attract. That's a scientific principle. Yet somehow today, people seem to be forgetting this. Like signs do not attract in a real way. Anyway, I'm not going to go into things like that. But what I'm saying is that everything exists in some form of a pair system. But there is another kind of pair system which is internal and external. We have minds and we have bodies. I can't see your mind, but I know what you're thinking, or I can guess what you're thinking by looking at your body. Sometime. Right? We have something invisible, internal, and we have a body, and it's the same for everything. Animals, plants, particles of energy, molecules, they all have something invisible inside telling them what to do. Little electrons are bouncing around the universe, and they're looking for protons to unite with, because they were designed to do that. And the protons are sitting there somewhere in the universe, waiting for an electron to pass by. Wow, gotcha! And then they start having their give and take. And they become something bigger. They start, you can imagine electrons and protons dancing around each other. Well, it's a bit difficult because there's such a long space between them, because the particles are so small. The space is amazing, incredible. And yet, somehow, they're able to communicate. Maybe it's telepathic, whatever it is, but there is something instinctive inside these bits and pieces that make them find each other. I was saying yesterday in the talk I was giving in Birmingham that the relative space between the particles in an atom, it's a bit like a football in the middle of a football pitch in a stadium, and the electron is like a pea placed on the outside of the stadium, somewhere on the extreme edge. That's kind of the relative distance between electrons and protons. That means there's a huge amount of space where we might assume is nothing. But can you imagine, they are talking to each other. They're communicating despite that incredible distance. So there is something happening. There must be something in between, even if we don't know what it is, that's able to communicate. That idea, that instinct, that law, whatever it is pulling them together, despite that distance. And of course, the external form is what we see. Well, of course, we say we can't see atoms and particles, but actually we can see. We can see the traces of them, their existence, and with electron microscopes, we can see things we couldn't see some years ago. So this is all the external matter. The matter becomes a flower, becomes an animal, becomes a human, and it's all directed by this invisible, instinctive, internal mind being, which, as I said, we all have. Right? Sometimes people maybe display behavior which seems to suggest that they don't have much of a mind. But the fact is, everybody has it. Even our body, without us knowing, there are things going on in our bodies which heals us, which does things, when we're not even aware of it. But the external form is a reflection of this invisible part. So if you think about it, if the external is a reflection of the internal, it's logical that the internal must be more important than the external. And coming to the idea of God, God created man in his own image, the Bible tells us. So in his own image, in the image of God, he created him male and female. This means that we are the image of God. Not a man, not a woman, but man and woman together. They are the image of God. And so you can understand from the words of Jesus when he said, if you see me, you see the Father. What he is saying is, when you look at me, you are looking at the masculine characteristics of God. In the same way, for example, if Rosvita stands up in front of the world, she could say, if you see me, you see the mother, God the mother. Ideally, that's how it should be, because we are the image of God. God should be living in us. We are the temples of God, we are told. So if we are the temples of God, where do we look for God? We can pray to God this way to get that internal inspiration and power, but actually we can also see God this way. God can speak to us through each other. God doesn't necessarily love us directly this way, but he loves us this way. We express God's love this way, and that's, we can say, how we can tell God is here, because of love. Isn't it how the early Christians were referred to by others? We don't understand what's going on, but look how they love one another. And they were inspired, impressed by that. So everything is made as it is because God is like that. So the same thing, if the cosmos, the universe that we look at is the physical, the physical universe, the stars and everything, it stands to reason that if there is a mind, an invisible part, and a body, if there is something invisible, like an instinct, if there are laws which guide everything, there is also an internal aspect to life, and that's the spiritual side, spiritual world. We have a spiritual body as well as a physical body, and it has to live somewhere. It has to exist somewhere. All the people who lived and died, they've gone somewhere. And that somewhere is the spirit world. Well, we'll talk more about that later. This is only to point out that as in all things there is internal and external, so with life itself there is an internal aspect of life and an external aspect of life. What time did I start?
You've got 10 minutes.
I've got another 10 minutes, is it? Okay. So let's move on then to giving and receiving. This is what we are doing now. We are having give and take, or giving and receiving. I'm giving, you are receiving. This is important. This is important because through giving and receiving, energy is multiplying. I was talking to the guests when I was teaching yesterday, and I was saying, look, 5 minutes ago you didn't know who I am. Now you still don't really know who I am, but at least you know my name is Ron. You know I'm a lecturer. You know what my voice sounds like. So in the future, when someone says, you remember Ron, well, they may not like me, but they may do. But at least, oh yeah, I remember him. He's the one who gave this lecture, this talk about this, that, and the other. Even if they don't remember the content, they might remember me. You know, oh yeah, he had that shirt. I didn't like his shirt. Or, oh yeah, he had a nice shirt on. So whatever it is, the point is, through the give and take, energy is multiplying and a relationship is building up. It's the same for us, you know. We've known each other for, I don't know how many years now. I remember when I joined, I went to Dunbar up in Scotland for my 7-day workshop, and Ed was there. I think I was the only person on the workshop. In fact, I was the only one on the 7-day workshop. He was working on building one of these concrete boats that we had. So I was helping. I mean, helping is the wrong word. I was just kind of standing around in between lectures, you know, or watching him doing his work while, you know, the boat is being built, and then we had the lectures. And I don't even remember anything about it. But you see, I remember Ed was building a boat. There's a relationship which is building up, you know. And of course, he's a nice guy, so I remember him because he's a nice guy. And it's the same with all of you. I know you better than I didn't know you 40 years ago, or however many years it is since we joined and met for the first time. But over time, you know, everybody is unique. And so we develop a relationship built on this uniqueness, and it's precious. And it's precious because God has brought us together, but actually for some particular purpose. Our purpose is that we have this common desire, first and foremost, to know God. We wanted to know God. We wanted to understand truth. And then we also maybe had a feeling, or perhaps even if we didn't want to know God, weren't thinking about God, but we wanted to see a better world. So we had some kind of a desire, a purpose for something better. So what's happening here then is our mind is directing our body. So the relationship between the subject and object in this thing here, this is the beginning of give and take. In give and take, I mentioned already the particles of energy, the proton, the electron, or a man, a woman, mind, body. The relationship between them is that one initiates and the other responds, giving and receiving. And of course, in human relationships are reversible. It's based on heart, so other elements come into it. But in the natural world, there are laws which determine, for example, a proton is in that position, an electron in that position, and they need each other to become something greater. So the subject maybe initiates, I don't know how it works with particles of energy. I'm not a physicist. All I know is that they come together. I know there is some dynamic that brings them together. But one has to initiate the giving and receiving. Maybe it's a magnetic pulse. Maybe there is a magnetic pulse which attracts the object like a magnet. You get a piece of metal which is there, you bring the magnet around and suddenly it connects together. So the subjective role is the initiating role, and the objective role is a responding role. It responds, and then the relationship is formed and something develops. And the outcome then is the result. It's what happens as a result of that. So as I said, in the natural world, things happen centered on a purpose that is built into the particles. Now yesterday I gave an example. I don't always use this example, but I got this from Reverend Arn, who used to do the 40-day workshops. If you were ever on his 40-day workshop, you might remember he talked about the philosophy of the seed. And he said if you wrote a book to describe all the characteristics inside the seed, you would need more books than the world can hold. And I thought about that. I thought it's incredible. And I was thinking about the acorn. It comes, I use that a lot. And I asked people yesterday, what do you think an acorn has to become? And so I could say the same to you. What do you think an acorn must become? You know what an acorn is anyway. What do you think it has to become?
A tree.
A tree?
Oak tree.
An oak tree. Well, that makes sense,
Food
yes.
for squirrels.
Sorry?
Food for squirrels.
Food for squirrels. That's a good answer. No, nobody gave me that yesterday. Anything else? Not you, because you were at the talk yesterday.
Give shelter.
Shelter. So you're all right, but as I said yesterday, some people said, yeah, an oak tree. And I said, you're right, but you're also wrong. And why do you think I said they were wrong? Because an oak tree is not destined to become an oak tree alone. It's destined to become a forest of oak trees. That means the design for all of that. You imagine now, an oak tree has to live maybe 500 years, sometimes 1,000 years. Imagine then what happens in the season, the cycle of a tree, right? You who live here on the farm or in this area must be really familiar with the cycles of the trees. You know, we're in high summer, the leaves are green, the trees are flourishing. But then in a couple of months' time, somehow the tree understands that the weather is going to change. The sap inside the tree, which gives it its life, it spreads up like this. It's reaching up, feeding the branches, feeding the leaves, feeding the acorns, is gradually going to start withdrawing. And when it starts to withdraw, the leaves are losing their food, their energy. The give and take is ceasing. So the leaf begins to die. When it dies, it turns all sorts of colours, doesn't it? Browns or reds. There's so many things going on. But eventually the leaf shrivels up and falls off the tree. And of course, in the process, the tree is producing fruit, which is the acorn, isn't it? It's the seed for the next tree. But you imagine now, this is one cycle, 1 year, when the tree has produced its acorn. And I think, I don't know if this is right, but when all the trees shed their leaves, what are they doing?
Fertilizing.
They are creating a fertilized bed for the acorn. Now, I was reading recently, because I've been doing quite a bit of gardening, that there is a type of gardening where you don't dig up the ground and plant things in. You put things on top of the ground and cover them with fertilizer. I can't remember the name for it now.
No dig.
Sorry?
Dig.
No dig.
Agriculture.
That's right, no digging agriculture.
Regenerative agriculture.
That's right, it's all on the surface. And I thought, wow, can you imagine, we don't have to dig the ground anymore? It's all there. But then I was thinking about that in connection with the trees, like the oak tree. The leaves are falling on the ground, the acorns are falling. And of course, there's not enough space for all these acorns to sprout and become trees. But then, that's nature, the origin, God has created something to help solve that problem. He created squirrels who love eating acorns. So then you don't get too many acorns, they're all rotten. The squirrels are gathering them up as fast as they can. One acorn falls and it rolls away and it finds itself underneath some leaves, and it's ignored, and then it sprouts. But I've just mentioned this tree, it's one cycle. In fact, I haven't even mentioned the whole cycle. I've only told you about the tree from summer, comes to autumn, and now the sap is withdrawing. The tree, the leaves are dying, everything is shriveling up and dying, except the tree is not dying. It's just closing in on itself, getting ready for what? Getting ready for winter. Now, how does it know that winter is coming? Because something is in the design inside that tree. And not only that now, it's got to get ready for spring when the weather starts to warm up and everything opens up and the sap starts rising again and it feeds in the branches and the buds on the trees are coming, and eventually when it gets warmer still, the leaves sprout, they open up, and then the fruit start appearing, and the cycle continues again for a second year and a third year and 100 years and 500 years. It's the incredible design inside that, and that's just one tree. It stages to become an oak tree. So then eventually you have 2 oak trees, and 3 and 5 and 10. It's multiplying. Isn't it just absolutely amazing and incredible that the design has to be inside the initial seed for it to develop and blossom and multiply? So the multiplication comes through the give and take. There is a give and take process, creating something, creating the seed. Through the particles inside, these bits of energy that are working together, multiplying, they become the seed, they become the tree. But it's based on a purpose. The purpose, the design is there, and the design has to be based on a purpose. Like the Bible says, I have purposed and I will do it. God is talking about maybe the restoration of man, but it's the same for everything. I have purposed. I have purposed an oak tree, and I will do it. I have purposed a forest, and I will do it. And so it goes on. And it's the same for us. I have purposed that you and I become absolutely mature, perfect beings, one with God. And then we can multiply. Isn't that awesome, that idea? We can multiply, we can reach that maturity just like the acorn. Just like the acorn became the tree, and then it reproduces acorns that may or may not sprout. We produce acorns ourselves. These are our children. And it's not just for one generation. I had to go through, I mean, in my age now, 76, I went through 76 winters, springs, summers, autumns. I had my hair cut a few times. All sorts of things happened just as you did. And here we are today. We have our children, our grandchildren, or whatever, and it goes on and on and on, because the design had to be there from the beginning, from some source that was not from me, because I am an effect. I did not create myself, and you didn't create yourself. In the end, we have to recognize that there's something created us, but it all based on this giving and receiving. God gave himself into his creation, given the energy which Kumiko mentioned earlier about universal prime force, this universal energy that's coming. The energy of God is coming into the different parts so that they can come together. And after the universal prime force, this vertical energy comes down, brings together the different parts who enter into a horizontal relationship. The give and take energy is created. And then multiplication takes place based on a purpose. And the result is the oak tree, a forest of oak trees, whatever you want. But the principle is the same for everything. The only place it really breaks down in humans is that our mind and bodies are not totally harmonized as they should be. And that's the issue that we need to deal with in the end. We won't deal with it, of course, in this talk, because it's about the principle of creation. But we need to understand, what is it then in man that stops this process happening as it should? The oak tree is going to produce seeds which will multiply. The lions, the zebras, the monkeys, the cats and the dogs, the birds and the bees, the butterflies, the plants, everything is doing what it was designed to do. It's perfect. And yet, we who are supposed to be lords of creation are messing it all up because we don't understand this process and how important our mind has to be developed, centering on God, centering on the absolute. And then our body, which is an extension, an expression of that internal, then can function as it should. And what is interesting, we think of God as some kind of absolute almighty being. That's great. But like the ocean, you go down to the sea. We live near the sea. Bernard lives near the sea. I live near the sea. And we go to the sea very often. And we look at the sea and we see the sea. But the sea is made up of particles of water, molecules of water, these H2Os all gathering together, thousands, millions, billions of them, racing together to join hands, dancing with each other, creating waves this way, creating waves that way. Wow! awesome. But every ocean, every sea has its individual part. This the drop of water. And that's like us. We are the drop of water that becomes one ocean of, like an ocean, when we can harmonize together. And it all begins with this understanding of the importance, mind-body unity, centered on the great purpose. Thank you very much. Let's take a break here. Everybody for a nice lunch and a nice experience this morning. While I was sitting there, I was thinking, since we finished up here giving and receiving, and I was talking about purpose and outcome and result, I was thinking, what is it that God wants? What is the purpose God wants us to know right at this moment? You all know the principle, but still, there must be a reason, a purpose why you are all here, and never mind why others are not here, but why you are here, why we are here, why I'm here. And what is it God wants to do to me, to you, or to say to me, to you? And I was just reflecting on that with no real conclusion, except, of course, maybe it's for the sake of our ancestors, maybe it's for the sake of any guests our ancestors might bring. I don't even know if they have any. But still, we need to get something from it ourselves. And I know whenever I lecture, I'm always feeling a little bit apprehensive because I feel I don't know what God is going to do or share. And also, I'm not here to teach people. I'm here to learn from God. What is God trying to tell me when I'm here talking? I try to keep that in mind because I'm aware of my limitations. I was thinking about Ed earlier on. Ed is a master. Has been lecturing long before even I joined. But that's not intimidating in itself, because in the end, it's just me and God and you and God. And what is it that he wants to say or do? What is the purpose? Maybe we'll all discover something in that while we are, going through the rest of the session. But I did feel that just before I move on to the next bit, to come back to this point anyway, that every relationship has a purpose. And we may not always be clear. In the natural world, of course, it's clear. The animals, the plants, they don't know. They just behave instinctively because it's inbuilt. But for us, it's not. We have that freedom. And of course, the real freedom is that first and foremost, we discover our parentage, our original parentage. And to realize, my goodness, gosh, God is not just God. God is really my parent, and God sees me, he knows me, he loves me. Because earlier we were talking about the relationship with parents and children. But the bottom line is, parents always want the best for their children. And what we really want, part of all of the family life, is for the children to understand the parent's heart. And, Eddie was sharing, in fact, we were all sharing about the importance of keeping that heart of love for the children. And when you look at the world today, what the world is desperately in need of is the heart of the parent that keeps that consistency. And, whatever we're experiencing, that people need that consistent heart. Even sometimes somebody cuts you up on the road and you feel like tooting your horn and screaming at them. But really, you can't do that. You have to digest it, because even though that person might not even be aware that you are thinking, I have to just digest this, in the spirit world, it's going on, it's known. So the attitude is important, because we send out ripples through the vibrations that we generate, which is what is happening. So even in terms of our thinking, we have to be careful how our thinking is if we are really trying to align with God, so that God always has that common base. God is the subject, we are the object. And if the object is flying off doing its own thing, the subject cannot relate, and then the purpose cannot be fulfilled, and the outcome, the result, cannot be what the original purpose should be. And often, of course, we don't know. We do something and we don't know. Why am I doing this? We're not entirely sure. But this is where you can see the importance, and I'll go into that maybe more in a minute when we look at the three blessings, the importance of cultivating our mind. And I really appreciated Kumiko's meditation, because it really tells you, you know, you need to sometimes sit down and just quieten the body and allow yourself to connect to that vertical, whether it's through meditation, whether it's really praying, like we were talking about St. Francis and his commitment to that total subjugation of his body. Really hard to do. You know, we are still trying. But anyway, the process has to keep going on. But it is important that we really connect with the internal. So as I've already said, in nature, all pairs relate centering on a common purpose. And God's purpose for creating, well, ultimately, of course, we know that God is a God of heart, and that God wants to share that heart. In theological terms, unification theological terms, we can say that heart is the impulse to seek joy through love, through loving, and through being loved. But heart, I'm always amazed when I think of heart. It's this impulse, it's this beating that cannot be stopped. The heart of God is this impulse to give love. Okay, we can say the end result of giving love is to experience joy. The purpose for it all is joy, happiness. And I go back to when I was growing up, my mother, she said, I don't mind what you do, but just be happy. And maybe you've all heard that from your parents, but that's the parents' desire, is they want the children to be happy. And of course, we want our children to go the best way so they can experience the best happiness. We don't like to see our children suffering, when relationships go wrong, when something happens. Even if they just get sick, we get worried. We can't help that. And I many times think about this, and I think, you know, I just have 4 children, and I worry about them. You know, the big joke is when children are small, you think, oh, we don't have to worry when they grow up, everything will be fine. But the reality is, as one sister said to me yesterday, you know, when they're small, you have small problems. But when they're big, you have big problems. You know, that's how it is. And then I thought, oh my goodness, imagine He created everything. You know, the parents, they're expecting their first child. Maybe you've done this in your home, I don't know how you're planning, but many parents, when they're expecting the first child, they're getting the room ready. Is it a boy? Is it a girl? Do we paint it blue? Do we paint it pink? What do we do? Do we buy a cot? Do we buy toys? How do we prepare for it? And many people prepare really well. Even my son, I remember when they were expecting their first child, they prepared the room and it was beautiful just for a child. And so the parents are so looking forward to the child coming. You can feel the joy is building up, you know. You know, when you have a child, your life changes. Suddenly you have to get a child seat in the car and other things start to take precedence. And my middle son, Godwin, who is a very academic, very intellectual person, he's really a good-hearted person, and I discovered that he is very emotional, but he's very controlled. But when they had their first child, he changed. Suddenly I saw this man who was very cool, he was really super cool and intellectual, and suddenly becoming a parent. You know, a parent, a dad, a mum, you just become stupid. Going back to Bernard's word earlier on, but in a nice way, of course. You can't help it. And I thought, you know, God, you imagine the billions of years God spent creating this cosmos. And for what reason? Why did God create it? He didn't need it. He doesn't need money. Diamonds, he can make the diamonds. He doesn't need all of those. He doesn't need any of it. So why did he create it? And you know, you think about it, then you realize, oh my God, God created this for me. He created it for you, but it's more than that, it's personal. He created it for me. I think then even about people like Jesus. When Jesus died on the cross, he wasn't supposed to die, but he did. But in the end, why did he die? He died not just for us, but he died for me. You know, a man gave his life. And sometimes I have a hard time making some conditions for somebody because I just don't feel like it. But I have to push myself. Then I think, Jesus died for me. He gave up his life for me. And then I think, I come back to this point. God created all of this for me. And so, of course, for his children, God Like the oak tree wants to see the acorn multiply and then grow and develop and spread, multiply. So God, as the absolute being of love, his heart, that impulse that could not stop, the impulse, the desire to create, to give his love, to give it to his child. Then when it all went wrong, you know, when you have a child and the child dies, it's like your world suddenly ends. Everything you prepared is suddenly for nothing. It's like it suddenly becomes like a big chain around your neck, because the purpose, what is all this for? It has absolutely no meaning. Then you realize, oh my goodness, God's purpose for creation was destroyed with the fall. Then nothing has meaning in its current situation. The beautiful universe has no meaning. How can God look at the world with beauty, with a sense of beauty, when the very object of his heart has broken it, and nothing appears beautiful? Nothing. That's how I felt, you know, when I thought about this whole world of heart. Unbelievably difficult to understand. Even I bang my head on a wall sometimes and think, why is it so hard for me to understand God's heart? I know God is a God who's been suffering, but why is it so hard to feel that? And yet there are times when you do feel it. Through your own situation, you can say, this must be how God is feeling. So, still, the ideal of God then, because of course I'm moving on to something else, talking about the things, how painful it is, but that absolute desire, the excitement and the expectation, the hope in God's heart to have everything. When God created and he said it is good, and then he created and said it is good, and then something else. Oh, and it's good. He's anticipating the day when his child comes. And when he creates Adam and Eve, God doesn't say it's good. He says it's very good. Finally, the object of that artistic desire is there. And all he has to do is watch them grow up. So enjoy everything. Eat all the fruit you like, but not that one. Because if you eat it, you'll die. So everything, enjoy everything. And the expectation then is all they have to do is be obedient to God and grow up, and they will fulfill their responsibility, and then everything will be complete. So the creation receives God's love, man receives God's love, and then through understanding and their faith in God, man becomes an object of beauty to God's heart, because he responds to God exactly as God intended. And we look at the world, we take dominion over the world, we do things, we grow trees, we chop them down, we build buildings, and we replant more trees so the creation is always growing. We love our animals, we take care of them. Everything is functioning as it should. God can take great joy because he looks at us. First and foremost, we have developed our relationship with our parent, our God. And so that relationship is set in stone. And we appreciate everything God did for me. My goodness, God, you made all this for me. Even just think about the colours. Why is the colours of nature mainly green? Do you know what is? You probably do. I mean, I'm asking the converted here. Rosalie, why is green the main colour?
Because that's the most calming colour.
Yes. Exactly, it's calming, it's peaceful. Can you imagine God was thinking even from the beginning, what colours to make things? And why red? What do we get when we think of red? We think of fire, we think of passion, we think of incredible energy, a burst of energy, fire. The fire of heart, the fire of love, explosive love. But then when we are tired, we want to rest, we take a walk in nature and we enjoy the green scenery and the beautiful colours in nature. We love the green, but isn't it lovely when you come to a nice field with all these cottage flowers there, the colours, they're awesome. A daisy, so many, you look at a field of daisies and they all look the same from a distance, but you go up to each one and you realise every single one is an individual. God put so much energy into every single blade of grass to make it different to the next one. Why? For us. And then when we sit down, even, Father talks about a grain of sand. All the universe is in a grain of sand, a tiny grain of sand that you look at in your hand. All the universe is in that grain of sand. You could spend your lifetime looking at that grain of sand and it will reveal so much to you. That's the value of meditation, the give and take. You have give and take with something and it will give itself back to you. When you get past the difficulties of how to sit down for a long time without getting cramp here or getting cramp there, but gradually the mind starts to become clearer, stronger, and you start to look, and then what's there starts to open up and give itself back to you. Wow! Then you see a whole universe in a tiny grain of sand. It's just unbelievable. So that is all coming from the desire of God to love. Just to give his love to his children, and there we are. We exist. So God's joy is complete, our joy is complete. And that's what God is wanting to create. A world where we have that relationship with our Heavenly Parent, but even more so, parents want their children to love each other, to take care of each other. But since Adam and Eve's fall, what have the children been doing? They've been devising ways, means, methods of how to destroy each other. What can I create that will destroy my brother? Okay, I build an axe, pop him on the head. I build a spear so I can stick him in the stomach. Oh, I found something that can blow him up. Then I can find something that can blow up thousands of people in one go. Can you imagine that a parent seeing that a child or children looking for ways to destroy the rest of the children? If my children started looking at each other and thinking, right, how can I get rid of them so I can get the inheritance? Well, of course, they'd be wasting their time because there isn't any inheritance. But there are families where people do have inheritances and the kids are squabbling, fighting to get the inheritance. Sometimes even before the parent has died. Anyway, that's again something else. But the point really is this unbelievable heart, the sensitivity. When you think of the texture of the petals of a flower, it's like velvet, even finer than velvet. How can somebody have such a sensitivity to create something so delicate? And yet, that's for us. That's what I find extraordinary. That a being, God, our parent, can create that for me and you, and of course then for us to be able to love one another. You know, to give each other nice gifts. You know, my wife, she's really great, but you know, she's very direct. I said this yesterday in the car, I think it was. I bought her a bunch of flowers about 20, 30 years ago, you know. I wasn't so sensitive then, but the flowers, she's really, really into flower arrangement and the beauty of things in the flowers. She's such a sense of harmony. So I bought her this bunch of flowers, but you know, they weren't as fresh as they should have been. When we go for flowers for a holy day, I get really somehow annoyed. She'd go through every single flower looking, that's not quite fresh enough. We should come back tomorrow. Let's go to the other shop. And I go, oh no, it's just flowers. But she is so sensitive like that. Anyway, I bought her these flowers and they weren't as fresh. So I gave them to her and she said, well, they're not very fresh, are they? For 20 years, I didn't buy her flowers again. I didn't dare. But Anyway, now she also understands my heart, you know. And I know I'm not always the most sensitive, but my heart is, I want to give you gifts, you know. Anyway, so everything is about joy. We want to please each other. When you give gifts to somebody, you don't give the leftovers. That's why we were educated in the movement. If we give our tithing, if we give notes, don't look for the scrap £5 notes that are in the back pocket. Find a new one if you can. You know, give the best. Or if I need an envelope, oh, there's a scrappy envelope. There's an envelope there, and it's a bit scuffed, but never mind. No, we try to give the best because you want to give the best of your heart in what you give. And that's the relationships of love. We feel disappointed when we give something, or rather somebody gives us something and you feel it's almost like a perfunctory gift. They have to give a gift, so they've given us something, but you don't feel their heart in it. So you don't really care about the gift so much as the heart that it's being given with. Because that is what it's all about, heart. The joy comes from heart. We feel joy when we have an object partner in which we see ourselves reflected. This is exactly the case that God creates everything. So God is reflected in all the creation, but not directly, because the creation can't communicate heart in the way we can. We write poetry, we write songs, we paint pictures to express the heart, and we give the gifts to others. So, you know, why do we have music when we have something going on? Because there is something beautiful in the music. And when the person sings with heart, like this song now Bernard just sang, it's so moving, so beautiful. People write incredible stuff, whether it's songs, poems, or whatever. So the same thing then, what is it that God wants to see in the world? He loves his nature, but he loves the children most. And God wants to see us growing up, reflecting his nature, and not just reflecting it in a way we look back to God and God sees himself in us, but to see himself in us when we are loving others as God is loving us. That is what is extraordinary. When God sees us loving one another, he's over the moon. He'd much prefer that. My father says, doesn't he? He'd rather we love each other, love our husbands, wives, children, more than we love true parents. Of course, in another way, he says, you must love me more than everybody, like Jesus said. Eh? But we understand the internal sense of that. But in practical sense, we have to love each other unconditionally and not look for ways to destroy each other. So, you know, when people are looking for ways to pull each other down, it has nothing to do with the ideal. So then the parents and children, parents want to see themselves reflected in the children only in the sense that parents have given unconditionally to the children. So the parents want to see the children giving unconditionally to each other. It's not by accident that the first commandment of God is to love God first, because all our values, all our standards, all the heart comes from God. But then the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. Love people as we want to be loved. It's so simple, and yet, of course, we just do not see it. So true joy and happiness comes through the fulfillment of the three blessings. Right? We talk about heart, we talk about joy, and earlier on I was talking about this next bit that I will talk about now, which is the cultivation of the mind, the relationship between the mind and the body. The three blessings, as we know, is about becoming mature, fruitful, multiplying, and having dominion. So of course, being fruitful is exactly as I explained with the oak tree. When the oak tree produces its fruit, it can multiply. But it can only produce its fruit, it can only multiply after it has produced its fruit. So for us, we can multiply only when we've produced our fruit. And what is our fruit? The fruit is to become the mature, perfect person. To become perfect as our Heavenly Father is perfect. To have the same heart. To be able to understand the importance of loving unconditionally. To seek joy through loving other people. And of course, in such a person becomes the temple of God. The temple of God is where God, if you see me, you see God, because God is in me. I am the temple of God. That's how it should be. And then as Jesus said, if I am in the Father as the Father is in me, and I'm in the Father, and I am in you, and we should be in him, in Jesus, in true parents. We should be in one another in that same spirit of love. So, of course, to become fruitful, we have to discipline our bodies, but we have to understand, well, why should I discipline my body? Why should I sit in meditation and try to control myself? Why should I do this? Why should I do that? Well, the body is the object. The body is the tool through which the Spirit can love. So the first thing then is I need to educate my inner self to understand that my body is the object of my inner self, and through my inner self the body can express the love of God. My relationship with my parent is expressed through my life, and while I'm on earth, through my body. So my education should be an internal education, through being told about God, being told how God exists, what is the nature of God, things like that. And then also to understand that God is a being of feeling. God is a being of thought. All the creation needed thinking about. Emotion, intellect, and will. Emotion, that means God feels. So then I have to develop this sensitivity to God. And how do I develop sensitivity? Well, we go back to the bit about giving and receiving. When you have give and take with something, you develop a relationship which you feel in the end. I mentioned the grain of sand. The grain of sand is just a grain of sand until it opens up and reveals itself to you. Then it becomes a universe. Meditation can take us into that world. Prayer is what takes us into the world of connection with God. Through prayer, we are having give and take. But the difficulty is sometimes, you pray and your body is complaining. I'm hungry, or my knees are aching. When I was a Franciscan, when I was in the monastery, I really had this sense that I just wanted to connect with God, because I always remembered my childhood. The first thing I learned in school, in a Catholic school, in the catechism was, who made you? God made me. And why did God make you? God made me to know him, love him, and serve him in this world, and to be happy with him forever in the next. Those 2 points stuck with me throughout my life. So when I was in the monastery, I realized, why am I in the monastery? Because I want to serve God. And therefore I need to know God. So I would spend hours in the chapel praying. I'd pray until my knees were bleeding, because I was so desperate to feel God, to understand God. You develop calluses then on your knees because the skin gets hard. Like when we play guitar, the skin gets hard because you're always doing, touching the same thing. So that's how I lived in the monastery. I wasn't in the monastery for that long because I left to join the movement. But in the time I was there, it was all about how can I develop that vertical relationship. I knew if I stayed in the monastery, eventually I would be out in the community as a monk, serving the community. But first and foremost, my training period was about me and God. And that's why I could spend hours in the chapel praying, because that was my purpose. So, of course, the difficult part was, you're dealing with fallen nature. We're dealing with fallen nature. So it'd be great if I had no fallen nature. I could straight away connect with God and so on. But of course, it's not like that. But the ideal way is that we are educated to learn. We are educated in the ways of God, about God. And then we are taught to train our body, to discipline our body. We are taught to learn to keep it still, to control, sometimes you feel like scratching, or you need to be still, you're concentrating, and then something scratches your ear and you can't help it, but your mind is distracted. We can't help it because we are not trained, we haven't disciplined our bodies so that we can ignore the itches or whatever it is. So ideally then, God's desire was for the first man and woman to cultivate their relationship with God, to believing or to listen to God, to listen to God's word and to keep God's word. And then their body, which didn't know sin at that time, probably they still had to train themselves, but the important thing for God was not how to keep your body as still as you can. That's really a secondary point. The first thing is that your heart has that capacity to love in the same way that God loves us. That's more important than the discipline of the body in the sense of trying to keep it still. But in these days, because we are out of sync with everything, we try to discipline our bodies as a way of getting our minds more focused. But anyway, let's say the original way was that the Adam and Eve were not expected to be super meditators, like sitting in the lotus position for hours every day. They had to just get on with their lives and do what they had to do, but focused on God. So God became part of their life. So then as they grow up, reach maturity, they become the ideal person, the person who embodies God. So suddenly then, God is walking on the earth in the temple, the living temple, the human being, Adam, and of course Eve. And once they reach that state of perfect maturity, then God is ready to take them to the next level. Heart has grown. And you know, the beautiful thing about this part is I realize that eternity is beautiful because our heart will keep expanding for all eternity. We reach the standard of God through absolute unconditional love. But as long as we have descendants going on and on and gone and on, our heart keeps expanding through those descendants. Oh, isn't that an awesome thought? It's not just me and my wife and my wife and our children and our grandchildren. Yeah, this is happening on earth now. But then we go to the spirit world and then we see our great-grandchildren. And then we see, wow, our great-great-grandchildren, look how we're multiplying. And you want to come down and be with everybody. I mean, I don't know literally how it all works because, and then I suppose I'll find out when I get to the spirit world. But I imagine that whenever you have the opportunity to come down, you can be with them. But first and foremost, we have to become husband and wife who embody God. So Adam and Eve would have become the first ideal parents. I don't know if the Father says that the word true parents somehow, I don't remember the words he said, but somehow it's always there. But I don't know if the word true was always there, because if there was no false, there would be no concept of true and false. It would just be the parents, the ideal parents. The point is that husband and wife who have both matured in mind and body and have become the temples of God can now multiply that by becoming the union of the two halves of God. There's a lovely song called, I think it's the wedding song, "The union of your spirits here has caused him to remain. For whenever two or more of you are gathered in his name, he is there." So the man and woman are the embodiments of the two aspects of God, the male, female, masculine, feminine. And therefore God can dwell fully in the couple. So then when they have children and the children are growing up, the children are looking at their parents. And when they look at their parents, they don't see just their parents, they see God. When the children want to see God and they ask their parents, well, where is God? And the parents can say, if you see us, you see God. How extraordinary, this whole concept of the love and the multiplication, the growth of love. So God now is growing physically in Adam and Eve, in the first man and woman. He is growing in his children. Okay, God is spirit, God is there, but God has no substance until the first man and woman perfect themselves and become the ideal parents. So the true children emerge, and of course as that family expands, they become a society and eventually the whole world. And the world is a world where people love and care for each other. I'm not saying people would never have arguments. Maybe they would end up fighting, then the parents come and divide them or someone divides them. But people wouldn't be going around looking for ways to blow each other up. You know, we have characters, and some people have a fiery character, some people have a peaceful character. You look at the ocean, and the ocean, I've seen the ocean when I worked as a sailor on a fishing boat. I've seen the ocean like a sheet of glass, absolutely still. But that's quite rare, because usually then the ripples come, the water moves, the wind moves over the water, then the water starts getting a bit, you know, you talk about the sea getting angry, and then it explodes into mighty 30-meter waves, or however big the waves are, you know, and everything is like, get out of the way because the sea is angry. And then after the storm, the sea goes back to being calm again. All these different emotions, they must be in people as well. So we get angry. I look at some people like, sometimes on the TV you see somebody getting really angry for no reason. What do you mean? You know, really. And I think, how can people get like that? But I guess that's their character. The point is not to be upset by that. You know, with my wife, for example, she's like the sea of glass that she never gets angry. And sometimes that makes me angry. Like, it's a good argument. But she won't argue. And so I get angry with myself because I can't have an argument with her. You know, it's so beautiful. But some people, I mean, Bernard's always joking about him and Masako. And I say this only because you keep telling it. Their relationship is sometimes very explosive because Masako is very strong. But they really love each other, they harmonize well, they understand each other. So you have a storm and then you have the peace and quiet, the calm. So all the emotions are there. I guess the emotions are in all of us. And we all go through our ups and downs, but it's expressed in different ways. But it's all there because it's in God. So God must look for ways to express his character. But what he doesn't want is for us to be beating each other up. You know, okay, so, you know, it's stormy day today, you know. How do we deal with it? Well, okay, my wife is not too happy today, so I'll just walk this way around instead of that way, you know. We understand because over time, like I went home Friday night, you know, and I'm only yesterday. I was only away for a day up in Birmingham, and I got home and I gave my wife a big hug and I said, oh, you know, I really missed you. And I've only been away for a few hours. And I realized, you know, we've grown, and it's the same, I think, for most of us, for all of us at some point. We grow into each other. We become so connected to each other that even when we have these stormy days, we are still, in the end, the heart has bound us together. This is what we are trying to achieve. I'm not saying it's like that in the world that we live in, because this is the fallen world and we are fallen people. But the ideal is like that. Even on stormy days, you learn to digest it, you know. Okay, my wife's not too happy today, I'll go and do a bit of gardening and stay out of her way. You know, she's in the kitchen chopping things with the big knife. So, can you imagine? We can laugh about these things, but we can understand it. But in the fallen world where people don't understand, you do get out of the way of that knife, because sometimes the knife does get flung around and cause serious problems. So anyway, the ideal family expands, fills the earth. We have the kingdom of heaven. And of course, naturally, we pass on to the spirit world and we go into the kingdom of heaven in the spirit world. Then the third blessing is where God wants us to take care of the creation he made for us. I've given you all of this, now look after it. So what do? We human beings, we study. We study the nature of things. We study the laws of nature. We study, for example, in physics, we learn how to put metals together and we make a motor car. We discover things like, instead of a square wheel on my cart, which just doesn't move, somebody said, well, why don't you chop those corners off? And it goes round and then it works more easily. You know, there's all sorts of ways that the inspirations are coming because our mind is connected to God, who is the source of all knowledge and all inspiration. So gradually we learn. And I'm sure you've all experienced these moments where suddenly a flash of inspiration comes and you found a way to do something that you couldn't figure out before. I used to love working with electric things. You know, when I was a boy, I was always taking things apart, radios and my piano. I took a piano apart and spread it out over the garden. Yeah. Every single piece. And unfortunately, it just ended up piece by piece getting thrown out because I didn't know how to put it together again. But over years, over time, when I take things apart, now I have a tendency to actually put them together again. And even sometimes they work. But anyway, in this particular case, I was taking a radio apart, which still had the old valves and electric wires, you know. So I was thinking, oh, what is this wire? So I put my finger on this wire and, oh, I got an electric shock, you know. But you know what the stupid thing was? I didn't understand what an electric shock was, so I put my finger on it again. And then I realized I'm being electrocuted here. So, but I learned, you know. So some people learn the hard way. Some people died in pushing the boundaries forward, like in space travel. People have died going into space, but it doesn't stop people looking for ways to improve things and do it. And that's how it is. We are willing to sacrifice ourselves to advance things, sometimes at the cost of our lives. So we learn as human beings to take dominion over nature and learn to use it for our good. We make chairs, we make tables, we make computers, we can do all sorts of things. We make glasses so we can see better. All of these things is part of God's gift to us, giving us the knowledge, giving us the ability to get inspired and learn to dominate the natural world. And we see that even with animals. Cats and dogs will fight each other, but when they grow up together as babies, they grow up loving each other. They don't fight. So it's all to do with the environments and dominion, the right kind of dominion. So of course, in the end, it's a dominion of love. And if we love the natural world properly, we will have a harmonious world. So when we create industries, for example, that create pollution, at the same time we should be thinking, there is a side effect here, and that is bad air. So what can we do about that? Not just let it keep spewing out into nature until one day we say, well, we have global warming, we've caused a problem, there's so much pollution. We should have started to deal with it when we first built things. Plastic, look at the scourge of plastic. Why didn't somebody think when they created plastic that it's going to last for years and say, well, shouldn't we also think of a way to get rid of it when we don't need it? But no, we just threw it out, and one day we see this big mountain of plastic that is just destroying us, or it's destroying the nature, animals that swallow plastic in the sea. But ideally, dominion then, the third blessing is dominion of love over the creation. We use it for our good, but we return something back into nature. That's right now, we're moving in that direction, I think. We talk about recycling, we have recycling bins. It's part of our becoming aware spiritually. Humanity is growing up, and we are becoming aware, slowly, but we are becoming aware, so we start recycling. We start doing things to improve the atmosphere, and so on. So that's the basic ideal in the three blessings then, is where we develop our relationship with God, and then once we've done that, we can multiply that quality of person in the couple and in the family, and then we love nature. The three blessings is all about cultivating first and foremost our relationship with God, but then God becomes part of everything we do, because we are the living temples of God, and God can live in us and with us and through us throughout our lives. And then of course we can think, when I go to the spirit world, I go into the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God's love. So then I have about 10 minutes left, so I think I can finish up. I should be able to finish up. We have to think that everything that exists doesn't just come into being. The oak tree, as we've talked about already, grew into an oak tree from an acorn, but it has to go through a growing process. And so in the same way as everything grows in a process, a growing process, we can understand that nature, the whole creation, the cosmos, the universe has been growing through a process. When the Bible talks about the 6 days of creation, well, we know now that this isn't 6 literal days of 24 hours. Although some people still believe that. But it isn't logical. But what is logical is to recognize that things have grown over periods of time. And when a certain state was achieved, then God could stand back and say, yeah, that's done, it's good. Then moved on to the next thing, until finally, of course, human beings were created. So then in the process of growing, nothing is grown perfect or mature. Everything grows from a small seed or a beginning point and has to go through a growing process, which we say is a formation stage, a growth stage, and a completion stage. The formation stage, you can say, is when the seed is created. And it's the same for everything. The human being doesn't start as a child, it starts as a seed inside the mother. The seed is fertilized by the man, and so the baby comes into existence, and then you could say the acorn inside the mother starts to grow. And the next thing is the growing process, which is what we call the growth stage, this whole growing period until finally the flower, in this case, has reached maturity when it produces its fruit and ready to multiply. So that's a process that affects everything automatically, except with human beings. Our physical body grows automatically. You know, we eat our bread and cheese and our crisps or whatever it is, our steak and chips. But whatever, the nourishment feeds this physical body. And of course we say that the better the food we eat, the better our bodies should be. They say you are what you eat. So if we want to be healthy, we think of eating healthy stuff. Okay, now and again, crisps and stuff like that is fine. But you wouldn't eat it all the time, because you know that the stuff inside won't be good for us in the end. But that's the point here, though, is we eat our food, we drink our water, tea, coffee, and we grow naturally. The child grows up to maturity, and then it can just keep growing throughout its life. But the inner person is our responsibility. And this is why education is so important. If nobody tells me it's my responsibility to develop myself, how do I do it? How do I know what to do? I go to school and I learn geography, I know the times tables, I know languages, I know many things. But I don't know how to develop myself, because nobody teaches me. Of course, the schools might say, well, that's the responsibility of the family. But these days, the state is getting so involved in the family, trying to tell the parents what the children should be learning. Sex education is an example, that the schools are teaching such rubbish, and sometimes the parents don't even have a choice about it. They are taking over parental responsibility. And I guess they're doing that because the general awareness is that people are not doing it themselves. Parents are not doing it themselves properly. Maybe that's what it is. But ideally then, we should be educating our inner self in the family. Of course, if you go back to the ideal, the parents would be teaching their children the right way to live, how to cultivate their inner self. But we are not living in the ideal world. But in the beginning, God's plan was for God to create everything, even the physical body, and then to tell us, you can eat the fruit of any tree in the garden, but not that particular fruit, or you'll die. So man's responsibility was to be obedient to his parent. I obey my parents, I trust my parents, and then I'll be fine. I will live and I'll grow and I'll do everything as I should. So in this period then, the parents leave the child alone. Look, I've told you what to do, so get on with your things, do what you need to do. But I told you, be careful of this, be careful of that. Children, when they go out in they want to cross the road, the parents will say, look right, look left. But when you cross the road, make sure you are aware what's happening. They try to tell the children. But at some point, the parent has to let the child go on their own. There is a point when the child says, oh, can I go to school on my own? And then the parents are kind of apprehensive because of all the things you hear. But at some point, the parent has to let them go on their own. And you trust the child to listen to the parent. Okay, I must cross the road by the lights. Right, I must press the button and wait for the red man to change to green. You trust them to do that. And the child, remembering the parent, press the button, cross when it's green, then they go safely across. This is you could say that's the indirect influence of the parent. And in the same way that the indirect influence of the parent over the child goes that way, so God's influence over us is indirect during our growing period, because God has to allow us to show that we are responsible, and therefore does not interfere in our lives. But that moment where you step out onto the road or not is a moment that even the parent has no control over. So even God, in the moment where Adam and Eve ate the fruit, God has no control over that moment when they made that fateful decision. Because first of all, God trusted them, they believed in their God, but as we know, it was an outside influence that caused the problem. But that's how it was. But ideally then, God allows us the freedom to develop until finally then we reach the stage where we are mature and we enter the direct dominion of God. So God enters into us and we become the living temple of God. We become like God. So then, finally then, I've got a couple of minutes just to conclude this bit about the spirit world and physical world. Yesterday, when I taught this bit, some people said, oh, would it be nice if I'd had more time to spend on that? Well, we can spend 5 minutes, we can spend 5 hours, we can spend 5 days, but it will never be enough because there are many things we can only learn through our life. So just as a snapshot, and of course yourselves, you've already studied this many times, but let's remind ourselves, give and take multiplies energy. And we have give and take with our physical selves in the physical world. We enjoy air, we enjoy sunlight, food, water, and so on and so on. So our physical body grows, and our physical senses are what we use to relate to the physical world. Sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell. Right? These are our physical senses. But then we also have a spiritual being, the inner person. And the inner person relates to the spiritual environment, particularly relating to God. And so in relating to God, bearing in mind this is the ideal scenario, that the original man was relating to God and received life elements from God, love and truth, and of course through obedience was doing the right thing. And this then, relating to the spiritual environment through spiritual senses, then the human being, the spiritual man, sends spirit elements into our physical self in the form of inspiration and all these inner sensations. So then, a man looks at the nature and he suddenly feels inspired to write a poem about nature, because God is trying to express something magical about the creation through this human being. So we have inspiration. Or the person sits down and just looks at it and starts humming, makes a song, and then realizes, oh, wouldn't it be nice if you find an instrument? He discovers a piece of twine hanging from a tree and touches it. Oh, it makes a noise, doing, doing, and then the Jew's harp is formed. And there's instruments are created. We don't know how people discover things, but just let your imagination run free, and then you see that the interaction between the physical senses and the physical world, the spiritual self and the spiritual world, and then we return vitality elements. In other words, through our actions, there are elements generated which feed our spirit, and we feel good, we feel we're growing, we're developing, we feel alive, we feel inspired, we feel dynamic, because there is a good relationship between these. There's a good relationship between the earth and the body. There's a good relationship between our spirit and our heavenly parent, and the good relationship in the give and take between the two. And so things are harmonious, dynamic, and alive. And then, of course, the sad thing is when we do something wrong and we cut that connection, and suddenly our life is drying up. Suddenly, depending on the seriousness of whatever it is that breaks that link, our life can suddenly die. That's why Adam and Eve were told, don't eat the fruit, because if you eat it, you'll die. They ate the fruit, they did what they were not supposed to do and broke the direct connection with God. And then they were lost. They felt guilty. All sorts of things happened. But that's another story. But for us right now, the ideal is this harmonious relationship between God and me and my spirit and my body and my body and the world around me. So the constant process of giving and receiving between our physical self and spiritual self is ever growing, ever developing, and then in this way we become wholesome. And also bear in mind that because we are the center of the physical world, we are the masters of the physical world, we are also the center of the spiritual world. Everything centers on man because we are the embodiment of God, whether in physical, spiritual, or whole, in the whole. The point is we become the center of the two worlds and the ruler of the two worlds, a microcosm of the macrocosm. And then finally then, we go through these 3 stages of existence, which is extraordinary to think. We spend time in the mother's womb, 9 months, give or take. And we are being fed through the umbilical cord, we are being fed water, through the water, the liquids and all that. We have no senses of no sense of the physical world. But it's extraordinary because when I talk with people and they say, I don't believe in God, or some people say everything just randomly came about, then I use the analogy that Father has given. When you look at the baby, how does a baby know it's going to come into the physical world? Not only that, but how does a baby know that it needs eyelashes to protect it from dust in the atmosphere? How does the baby know it needs eyebrows to stop sweat going into the eyes? How does the baby know it, the shape of its face? Here, for example, when your nose is running, the water, the liquid doesn't go down into your mouth, it gets pushed to the side. And then we have these lines here which flow the liquids away. How does it know that if it's all random? It doesn't, it's impossible. So you can see the design is already inside there in the baby, because the design says that that baby is going to come into this world, the physical world. And then in the physical world, of course, it's a whole new level of experiences. In this world, we live in a world of liquid water. In this world, a world of air. And of course, when we reach the natural conclusion to our physical lives, we pass on into the spiritual world and we are totally free. We don't have limitations. If you jump off a mountain in this world, you will die. Because there is that force of gravity which says you may not like it, you may not believe it, you may fight against it, but gravity will win if you jump off the mountain. It will win. But here, we are free of all those things because everything is centered on spirit, on mind, on heart, and it's all about love. World of water, world of air, world of love. And I think that's the end. Thank you so much.